I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. As I'm sure you know, Michael Cohen is currently testifying in the Donald Trump criminal trial in Manhattan. Michael Cohen will again be testifying on Monday. There'll be more cross-examination there. But don't you worry, Mea Culpa fans. We've got an excellent episode for you today. And I'm trying to curate my favorite Michael Cohen Mea Culpa interviews of all time. And I was thinking to myself, which interview would I want to be watching this weekend? And I think about the interview Michael Cohen did with Democratic Congress member Steve Cohen back in January of 2022. And in light of a lot of the recent developments on Capitol Hill and the recent developments politically in our country, I would say that everything Michael Cohen and Steve Cohen, Congressmember Cohen, talked about was prescient, on point, and so necessary to read, to review, to watch, to understand in the context of the current political zeitgeist and moment. So without further ado, I'll stop blabbing. And this is one of my favorite episodes. Michael Cohen and Congressmember Steve Cohen. Let's play it.
So Congressman Cohen, Monday was Martin Luther King Day, and I couldn't help but notice how the president chastised those lawmakers who sought to wrap themselves in the rhetoric of Dr. Martin Luther King for political expediency, yet they continue to erode voting rights for African Americans and other anti-democratic maneuvers that would have been unthinkable to Dr. King. Now, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Representative Lauren Boebert, Senators Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley, and former White House press secretaries Kayleigh McEnany and Sarah Huckabee Sanders all praised the slain civil rights icon on Twitter yesterday on the annual celebration of his legacy. How does it make you feel when you see this kind of hypocrisy in motion? And how do they think that their words line up with their current actions?
Well, it's despicable, Michael. And it's been going on for years, and it's been with Dr. King. And, I hear when I go to the black churches a lot, I'll hear ministers talk about being about Jesus and not of Jesus. And that's what these Republicans are. They're about Dr. King, but they're not of Dr. King. They don't know Dr. King, and they don't follow his message of caring about people who are in need of health care, the greatest civil right that there is, caring about housing, caring about voting laws and the opportunity for the ballot. Dr. King was about all those things. He was about the right to organize. And that's why he came to Memphis, was to organize the sanitation workers for the AFSCME, American Federation of State County Municipal Employees, so they could be treated as a man. I am a man. And these people that do it, they talk about Dr. King. This is the same type of people, or maybe themselves included, who couldn't stand Muhammad Ali when he became Muhammad Ali in the 60s or later, and some of his positions he took because he was Muslim, and now they all revere Muhammad Ali. But they don't know what the man was about and what they were supportive of, and they just take the burnished Madison Avenue idea of Dr. King and or Muhammad Ali. But they have no idea about the person, just like they have no idea about Jesus. Jesus in Matthew was clear. He was about feeding the hungry and clothing those who were in need of clothing, and taking in all kind of people, from lepers to criminals on the cross adjacent to him, and caring about them and caring about everyone and feeding people who needed food. So it's just what's happened today is it's crazy. We're living in a surreal world, and to see Donald Trump going around at these places like Florence, Arizona, and talking about the election being stolen from him, the man is mentally ill. And other times there would be a guy with a big net coming after him to grab him and take him back to the asylum.
He's the kind of guy that you would see on television when they had the hook, right? In order to get him off as he was accepting an award and be playing the music. But, I did that as well. I actually posted a quote from Dr. King. Now, I don't put myself into the same category as Lauren Boeberts and, Graham or Josh Hawley or Donald Trump or any of those. But what I did is I put it out there. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. That was the one that I ended up choosing. And I did that because I had on the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson and I speaking on this podcast. And there were so many things that we were talking about, including my even episode before that with Dr. Stephen Hassan, who's the cult specialist in extradition of people out of cults. And I have to tell you, it was a tough choice which quote I really wanted to put out. There's a second one that I also thought about. But I do truly believe that those of us that speak out, that are continuing the struggle, and it is a terribly difficult struggle, simply because the people who are supporters of Trump and Trumpism are so vile in their nature, including the people whose names that I mentioned in the question to you, that I thought it was really appropriate at the time, because I will continue, as do you, on a regular basis, not to stay silent, to continue to talk about Donald Trump and Trumpism and the attempted destruction of our democracy and a coup on our Capitol.
Well, it's ongoing. And what he's doing is looking at the election of 2024, and he's going to run on the idea of the big lie. And if he loses, he's going to try to have the people who, and he said it, it's not so important who votes, but who counts the votes. And he's trying to get the vote counters to be his people. So when he calls them up and says, like he did with the Secretary of State in Georgia, I need 11. Can you get me 11,300 votes? The guy will say, how about 15,000? Will that do? He wants somebody to say, yes, sir, Mr. Trump, I'll give you 15,000 votes, and he'll steal the election. It's just unfathomable. Let me guess, the second quote you were looking at from Dr. King, was it the one about you're not judged where you are in times of convenience and safety, but where you are in times of controversy and challenge, something like that?
100%. That's exactly what it was. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. That's exactly, because they're so similar, but yet they're still so different. I do want to say something, because you just brought up a very interesting point, one that I talk about a lot, both here on Mea Culpa as well as on television. There was an adage that he had heard from somebody, and I don't remember who it was, but it was about how Vladimir Putin continues to have a stronghold over Russia and remaining as president of the country. And there's an adage that he heard, and it's got to be sitting in his mind. It doesn't matter who counts the votes. It doesn't matter who you vote for. All that matters is who's counting the votes. That's a Vladimir Putin adage that Trump is acting upon. And you, once again, you nailed it right on the head. I mean, it is a scary, scary notion. I do want to just say where I disagree with you is he is not going to run in 2024. Despite all of this bullshit and all of his rhetoric, I promise you, this whole thing, this whole shenanigans about setting up now a campaign with this girl Wiley and other what they call, Republican operatives and so on. They even mentioned Dan Scavino. Dan Scavino was the general manager of the Trump National Golf Club in Westchester. He's far from, a political operative. He basically has no fucking idea what he's even talking about 90% of the time, and was actually fired by Donald, one of the few people ever to be fired and capable of coming back into his circle. But I assure you, this is all, Congressman, part of the grift. He is going to use the same BS that he's been running on, that I'm running in. Well, I really can't talk about it at the moment. The rules don't. All of a sudden, he cares about rules, right? And he's not going to. This is so that he could continue to raise money, not just for himself, but smaller amounts for these other candidates. So at least he could have loyalty, or think he's going to get loyalty from them in 2022 and 2024 to stop some of these commissions.
Well, I hope you're right. But, I do worry, because he would like to have a revenge opportunity on everybody that he thinks has ever crossed him. And that would be by being president. He could do it with impunity, because he probably he wouldn't think about another term, and he would pardon everybody that he wanted to, and try to prosecute people otherwise. Let me ask you this, Michael. Why do you think he's going after DeSantis? DeSantis looks like the primary person that could give him a challenge if he ran, and he's going after him. If he's not going to run, why take on a fight with the governor of your state?
It's a great question. And the reason is somewhere along the line, DeSantis must have done something. We may or may not know about it. I don't know what the exact specific moment was, but DeSantis must have done something that he deemed to be disloyal. And as a direct result, he now sees DeSantis not as competition in the event that he's going to pretend to run and so on, but it's more that he's not going to do for me what I want if and when he becomes president of the United States. So therefore, I'm not going to back him. I need to back somebody that's going to be, in Donald's mind, my puppet. He wants to be like what Putin was when he was not able to run and for the presidency. And so he made himself into the prime minister, which is a step above the president. That's when he made Medvedev president. One of the things that Donald, in his crazy, whacked out sociopathic mind, is really believing is that he should be able to control each and every person that he is supporting or that he says anything good about. He considers the two to be the same. And that way, he retains a form of power. And in his mind, he thinks that he could become more than just a president. He wants to be like what Putin became, a prime minister of the country that would have ultimate rights over the president.
He wants to be the godfather out of Mar-a-Lago and have people come down, I guess. But, you know, he's so full of it. I saw where he put out something at his rally in Arizona and said that China and Russia don't fear us like they used to. They don't fear us. Russia fear us? He used to shine Putin's shoes. Excuse me, Donald, you missed a little bit there down there on the bottoms. Would you please lick the bottoms of my shoes? Yes, sir, Mr. Putin. I mean, it's absurd. Just
do
crazy.
You recall? Yeah, do you recall when Donald actually said that I believe Putin and that I do not believe our law enforcement, our FBI, and our intelligence agencies? That had to have been a kick in the ass to so many of the supporters that even to this day are still supporting him, because many of them are military or have people in their family that are part of the military, that are part of government. If you're part of government and the president of the United States is sitting with possibly one of this country's greatest foes, and you're siding with him over your own intelligence agencies, I mean, that's when they should have turned around and said that there's something significantly wrong with this man and that he is jeopardizing our democracy.
Well, when you look at it, it's crazy the support he's got. They just are denying. They don't want to admit that the last 4 years or how many years it's been that they've been Trumpophiles, that they were lied to and that they were duped. And they don't want to accept that, so they can't admit it, and they've got a blind spot. It's just astonishing. These people, the evangelical Christians support him because of his position on getting the 3 Supreme Court justices and challenging Roe v. Wade, and that's their major issue. But there's nothing Christ-like about this man. He's the antithesis of Christ, and it just it's just amazing. They have this blind spot, and they seem to just continue to support him. And it's military people, and you name it. He does appeal to some of these people because he's anti-establishment. But while he's anti-establishment, it's all for Trump. I mean, he's against the establishment when they don't help him. But it's just that the people won't leave him. It's just astonishing the loyalty they have because they don't want to admit that they were duped, and they certainly were duped. And the guy's just he's the biggest con man. We had Colonel Parker here managing Elvis. Of course, we all love Elvis, and Elvis was a great singer and a good human being. But Colonel Parker used him and was a carny man, and just like P.T. Barnum, and that's what Donald Trump is. He's Colonel Parker, P.T. Barnum, and Billy Sunday.
See, I always find it interesting when you get people like Kevin McCarthy or Boebert or Trump, or if you notice, Donald actually did not put anything out in honor of Martin Luther King Day for obvious, unfortunately obvious reasons. But you have all of these individuals that go there and they try to trade off of Dr. King's legacy for their own benefit. And I'm personally, I was offended when I was seeing these tweets popping up all over, with photos of Dr. King and so on. If you truly believe in Dr. King's legacy, you should not be for voters for this Voters Act that's going on right now. I mean, you should be standing up against it. You should be protesting the fact that this is an act that is going to inhibit people of color, Black, brown, and so on, minorities, from being able to vote and vote in even like this upcoming midterm election. And that's why they're trying to push it as quickly and fighting as hard as they are in order to stop it.
And all these Republican, particularly Southern congressmen, who are saying, "Oh, we've improved. It's not like it was in 1965. We're so much better, and we have so many elected officials who are African American in X, Y, and Z states." We're not like we were in 65, but we still have certain tendencies like that. And the Voting Rights Act was renewed in the early part of this century when George Bush was president, unanimously. All the Republicans voted for it. And we're not that much different from then, but we needed the Voting Rights Act at that time. And John Roberts found a way to say, "Oh, America's better. We don't need these designated areas, and we'll get rid of the voting rights, the portion that has pre-clearance provisions." And we came up with a formula, and we had a formula then, but we got a new formula, and they don't want to deal with that. But we ought to have pre-clearance, but they don't even want to give the Justice Department. They certainly don't want Merrick Garland to be overseeing election laws and gerrymandering in states and having to have pre-clearance and saying that they don't meet the test of the Constitution. Merrick Garland surprised me in a way. I think he's got a great deal of character, and he's a good human being. I wish he was a little stronger in some things and acted a little quicker. I wish he'd go after individual one and indict him in the case in which you had served time for, because he was the person who served double time. And I wish he'd go after him in so many other areas. But he did go after the Oath Keeper, the Oath Keepers, for a seditious conspiracy. And that was a step above just going after the people who were the foot soldiers. And he said in his speech he was going to go after everybody if they were involved, whether they were at the Capitol or not. And hopefully that includes Trump. So he's moving along, and I think he's a good man. Did you ever know of a judge named Katzman in New York State? Was he not?
No.
Google Katzman with two N's. He died about 6 months or a year ago. I didn't know him until he died. What a fabulous man he was. He was the chief judge of the United States second district, I guess, but it's in New York. And he was appointed at the recommendation of Moynihan by Clinton. I don't think he'd ever practiced law. He'd been a law professor. He was just a jewel of a human being. And he and Merrick Garland were friends. When Merrick Garland was the chair of the chief justice or chief judge, administrative judge, whatever they call him, of the D.C. district. Katzman was in the second district, which is in New York, Manhattan, I think. But Katzman was a great man, and I think he admires him, and just a brilliant man who cared about legal services for the poor and cared about the poor. And we just read about him. You'll fall in love with him. He was just a human angel of a person.
I got to give you a lot of credit, Congressman. You sit amongst a group of individuals who behave so foolishly. They say such stupid things. Their actions are so anti-American. It's so anti-democracy. I don't know how some congressmen don't. I don't understand how it's not more like England with Parliament, where they get up, they start throwing shoes at each other, they start yelling at each other during the middle of their speeches and so on. I mean, I would lose my shit because I know I don't have a lot of patience for stupidity. And I sit and I'm just going to go right back to the same people, right? Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, you got, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ted Cruz, on both in the House and the Senate. I don't know how more people don't end up walking around with black eyes, because I could not sit there and listen to the stupidity over and over and over. I don't understand how anybody can get up and be against voters' rights. I just don't understand it. And then go on to their Twitter accounts in order to promote the man who was probably most influential in that area and praise him.
Yeah, it is. It's hypocrisy. It's difficult. We have different rules. I mean, sometimes, but you have to work with these people. It's very difficult. I had a situation where the senator from my district, Marsha Blackburn, was questioning a nominee for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, a black man. He'd be the first black man from Tennessee ever on the Sixth Circuit, and I think and the second African American from Tennessee ever. And she said, "I can't support this man because when we got into it and looked into his background, he had a rap sheet. His rap sheet, quote unquote, he had a ticket 45 and a 40, and two others driving through Mississippi and Alabama. And when you're driving while black in Mississippi and Alabama 12 years ago, you're lucky you got a ticket." That's a rap sheet.
Have you ever wished that you had whiter and a brighter smile? Well, before you visit a dentist, you should know that their whitening treatments, they're very expensive. And you know what? It's not just the price. You also have to book the appointment, schedule time away from work or family to sit in a dentist's office chair while undergoing this procedure. It's a hassle. Fortunately, now you can try Smile Actives at home or anywhere, anytime. Smile Actives offers a safe and an affordable alternative to those expensive whitening procedures. You see, I've had past experience with these whitening agents, and I gotta tell you, I hated it. It causes these zingers afterwards. It's really uncomfortable. And I'm a big coffee drinker, and so I hate to say it, your teeth get stained. But that's why it's so important to use Smile Actives, because it brings you a bright smile, and a bright smile makes a good impression. Smile Actives makes a teeth whitening gel that can simply be added to your toothpaste every time that you brush your teeth. So there's no change in your routine, there's no extra time, and there's no messy strips, trays, or lights. Simply add Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves and crannies so that you get better whitening. 97% of Smile Actives users in a clinical trial reported up to 6 shades whiter on average. Listen to what I just said, up to 6 shades whiter on average, and all within 30 days. I mean, that's the kind of trial that I like. So what are you waiting for? Start getting comments on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. So visit smileactives.com/Cohen today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery, plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/Cohen. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
He wouldn't have said that to she wouldn't have said that to a white person. She probably wouldn't have said it to an African-American female, just a dog whistle. But you have to, you have to work with those people. It's very difficult. And there's some of them, that's the idea why a lot of people aren't running for re-election in Congress. A lot of Democrats are fearful that the Republicans will get the majority and a Kevin McCarthy or a Jim Jordan will be speaker. And that some of these people, somebody like Jim Jordan or somebody else will be chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And my committee right now, Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, will be either Mike Johnson or it'll be Matt Gaetz. I mean, who knows what they'll be, and what Lauren Boebert will do, and what it's going to be Mondo Connie. It's going to be really, really crazy, and it's difficult to see that. And I'm going to run, but I hate the idea if they get the majority, and I think they probably will. It will be hell to bear it, and I guess what I'll have to do is be like Michael Cohen, and I'm not going to throw shoes, but I'll throw some verbal barbs.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to look. I know Marsha Blackburn. I know her quite well. Spent quite a lot of time with her. She actually wanted a spot in the administration. Trump wouldn't give it to her. He didn't like her. He didn't. I mean, think about it. She was really one of the earliest supporters of his campaign. She used to come around on a regular basis to the office. She called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in New York. Can I come on up?" Sure. And I'd bring her into Trump's office. They would engage in conversation. She wanted, I think, to be Secretary of the Economy or something like that. And he didn't want her in the administration at all, which is interesting considering she seems to be such a massive supporter, of his. I don't get it. But I do want to ask you, Congressman, last week's arrest, and the gentleman you were referring to was Stuart Rhodes for the seditious conspiracy. At least to me, it seems to signal a more aggressive phase of the January 6th investigation. Yet still, we seem no closer to indicting those who truly planned the January 6th insurrection and who put groups like the Oath Keepers and others in motion. Do you believe that Merrick Garland should be more aggressive in terms of pursuing Donald Trump and his family and his inner circle for their actions on January 6th in light of these recent indictments? And do you think that he stepped up his game since your criticism of the Attorney General this fall?
Well, I think a little bit, but I think he's a very much a measured man. He's never really been a man particularly of action. He's been a jurist who listens to arguments and rules, and he was acceptable. Probably they thought to the Republicans, and that's why President Obama nominated the Supreme Court. He was a distinguished jurist and a brilliant man, but not so far out on his opinions that the Republicans might not support him. Well, they wouldn't have supported anybody, as it turned out. But I think he's coming along. You build your cases in the Justice Department from the bottom up, and you hope you get a few people to flip and give you information on somebody above you. And maybe they're hoping one of these Oath Keepers will give them something where they had contact with Bannon or with Flynn or with the Giuliani or with the Hat Man, Roger Stone, or somebody. And eventually they get somebody to flip to get to work Trump. And that may be the ace card Trump's holding. If he has to be president, he can pardon all these people. So that's one thing he needs. He needs to be able to have all these people who can support him and fealty toward him, so that if they get arrested for something, convicted for something, they'll know, well, they'll just appeal it long enough for him to get in office and he'll pardon them. So they have purloined the justice system. And but I think Merrick Garland's coming along. He's slower than I wished he was, but he is coming along. He's made the step from the bottom level to the second floor, and maybe it's a way to get to the top.
So here's what we know. And on this show, we're critical of everyone. It's not a show where it's all anti-Trump. I mean, we criticize those people who deserve to be criticized. And yes, I agree with you. Merrick Garland has been incredibly slow in virtually every single thing that has come before him. When we're talking about the January 6th insurrection, there's facts that we know, not because we're making it up like Trump and Trump supporters do, Fox News and so on. It's because it's a fact. The DOJ has already, Merrick Garland has already stated that they have identified and have spoken to more than 300 individuals. Now, I've been before Congress and the Senate in these committee hearings, and each hearing lasted a minimum of 9 hours. And I talk about this on the podcast before. That's 2,700 hours, which equals 112 and a half days of continuous investigation. You have it's a third of a year that you have literally spoken to people about one single case. And it's not that difficult once you have all of the text messages and the emails and communications going back and forth between people inside the Capitol and people on the outside. I mean, they know, for example, that there's this, it's more than just the Roger Stones, the Don Juniors, the Donald Trumps and so on. There was an entire meeting the night before at the Willard Hotel. They know all about that too. They have the documents. You have, is what we like to call in law, documentary evidence. This is not some hypothetical hearsay communication. These are actual communications that went on, including people who had set up that rally. We're talking about the young girl, Jennifer Lawrence, and Dustin Blackman. I forget what his last name is. We also know that Laura Trump and Eric Trump, along with an Amy Kramer and a Kylie Kramer, that they took over that Ellipse rally and turned it into a march. I personally don't understand how it's possible that after a year plus, we still don't have more indictments. The only indictments that they have are people like the Oath Keepers and others. Now, they deserve what they're going to get, but I'm talking about the real people the real people that incited this, and the real people that got this rally going?
Well, there are people including Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's wife. She was involved in organizing and the rally. There were lots of people that organized the rally. They knew what was going to happen. They knew the intent of it. It wasn't just a spontaneous combustion. This was planned, and there was planning going on. And I think they'll get to it, and I think there'll be indictments. I've read. I don't recall where I saw it on social media, but it was somebody I respected, and it's one of the talking heads on MSNBC or CNN. It wasn't Joyce, but one of the former prosecutors, and they said it would be tough. They wanted to see Trump get his being indicted, but they thought it'd be difficult to get a conviction, and they thought that maybe that's what would slow it up Merrick Garland. It probably would be difficult to get a conviction because unless they have some smoking gun with him telling people this is what it is, or a paper, because he always, as you probably know as well as anybody, he cautions his words. He will say something like, I want you to be peaceful, and I want you to be patriotic, or some horse manure like that. And then the next minute he's going, but if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country. So he gives you a fight like hell statement. He gives you a peaceful and patriotic statement. And then he said, and I understand, I read that he did want to go, or told somebody he wanted to go to the Capitol, but the Secret Service told him, we can't give you protection. We can't allow it. He knew he wasn't going to the Capitol when he said he was going to go to the Capitol with them. But he's a consummate liar. He's a consummate liar. He should be. What is it? You turn into the pillar of stone, pillar of salt.
Yeah. Well, then let me answer this, Congressman. What else do you think that Merrick Garland needs to prosecute Donald Trump for inciting the insurrection? I mean, how is it remotely feasible that this country and the Attorney General can let him get away with it without any repercussions? Again, there's so much documentation. If you have 112 and a half days straight of testimony, that's not even inclusive of the amount of paperwork, emails, text messages, etc., that they must have. They probably have an entire storage bin full of documents that they've obtained from these 300 individuals, because today nobody sends letters anymore except for Trump and Kim Jong-un. Nobody sends love letters. Right? You send an email, a text, and each one of those constitutes one piece of paper. You have 300 people with, I don't even know how many documents. It must be each one indicating that it's Donald Trump who started this. That's what was going on through his head. And now you don't even bring the indictments against the top dog. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's some of the frustration that Americans are having right now with our Department of Justice.
I've been calling out for it for a long time, but I do think he's on the path, and I think he needs to. I don't know if he's gotten to the Willard Hotel gang yet, but if he gets to them and questions them, I know Bill Barr has. It's my understanding Bill Barr has testified to the committee or committee members, but I don't know if at Stone would probably not testify. Bannon didn't testify, and I'm sure they had. I don't heard anything about Flynn or the Trump kids, but they need to get to that level. They need to get into the Willard Hotel and get some statements or some emails or something. I think to have something he in fact feel comfortable with. But I agree with you. It's there, but right now it's there just basically on him saying, "Go to the Capitol. I'll go with you. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." You can't. You'd like to see something more concrete.
Steve, what we know from members, including Ivanka's statements, including Mark Meadows' statements, for 187 minutes, this orange tangerine decided that he was going to stand there and admire the actions of a paramilitary group trying to storm the Capitol to prevent the lawful certification of the president. I mean, I just don't understand. And I say this all the time too. You don't need to kill 10 people to be a murderer. Just get them on one thing. It's something that I've also said to the Attorney General here in New York, as well as the district attorney. You don't have to have a litany of criminal actions in order to just put them behind bars, or create a situation where he cannot even lie anymore about a possible 2024 election, that he becomes so fucking toxic to the Republican Party that no Republican in their right mind, and we have quite a few that aren't in their right mind, would ever ask him for an endorsement. That's how you box baby into the corner.
Well, you're right. You're right, Michael. You need to do that. It's sad to see Katko announce he's not going to run for re-election. He was a good guy. Certainly Anthony Gonzalez in Ohio, who's not running because they voted to impeach and they just didn't want to put up with it. They've gotten so much abuse from the Trump supporters on social media and threats to their family. Gonzalez got those. I'm not sure what Katko's got. But they decided not to run. And 2 years earlier, there were really good people who just couldn't stand it anymore. There was a congressman from up in Michigan who was a good guy. And he told me, he said, I just can't stand serving with Trump anymore. And he didn't run for re-election after 3 terms. And then there was the guy in Naples who Rooney, who a good man. I think he served a term or 2 and he quit. And then there was a guy from Michigan who since deceased, but he couldn't stand it either. But they didn't stand up to him when they were in Congress. They were quiet. I tried to get Mitchell. Mitchell was from Michigan and Rooney to sign on to the impeachment and vote for impeachment. They wouldn't do it. It's just a shame. They had their chances to stand up in times of challenge and when you needed courage, as Dr. King talked about. Instead, they didn't do it. Trump's losing a little bit of his support. I think his numbers have come down some. I think he's losing. Some people are talking out against him that you'd be surprised. We're surprised about. And I think that there's enough Republicans that don't want to see him at the head of the ticket. But whether they'll be courageous is another issue.
You know, I'm glad you brought up Katko because obviously earlier this week, New York Representative John Katko, who was one of 10 Republicans, one of 10 who voted to impeach Donald Trump, became the 3rd lawmaker in this group to announce that they would not seek the re-election for their office. Now, this type of political purging has really profound consequences as it solidifies Trump's cult-like hold of the GOP. And what it does is it creates a party of mini Trumps. So I'm curious, as a member of Congress yourself, how you view this purging of moderate Republicans from the party, and how will people like Katko and others who were moderate Republicans, how will you ever, as Democrats, be able to accomplish anything when there's no way to reach across the aisle in order to accomplish anything bipartisan?
Well, it's very difficult because and I hear so many people and good people of good conscience, and they go, why can't y'all just work together and find some compromise? And then you had Kristen Sinema come up with that speech on the floor. And when I was watching her speech on the floor, I just watched it and I thought, Mike, one thing you do learn in Congress is that there is no compromise because the Republicans, Mitch McConnell, just as soon as Barack Obama was sworn in, said our job is to see he doesn't have a second term. He basically said the same thing about Joe Biden. And that it's about power. McConnell wants to be leader again, and they want to have a president and have power. McCarthy wants to be speaker. So the compromise, they don't want to give Biden any victories. And even the 13 people that voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the House, they got abuse from House members for voting for it and from Republicans. So it's very difficult to think that you, and so you good people you can work with do quit. And they quit in 2020 and they quit this year, and there'll be other good people quitting. But the Bo Barretts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and what's the guy in the wheelchair guy that's so awful.
You talk about Cawthorn.
Yeah, he's awful. I mean, he gives what was his name in the Great Gatsby? There was Caulfield or something. He gives him a bad name. But anyway, he's just awful. And they got these other people. And Matt Gaetz coming out and he's auditioning for a pardon, I think, because he's going to have trouble in Florida. Yes, I read where his girlfriend testified before the grand jury. That was not a good thing for Matt. So I mean, It's just a difficult thing, and it's hard to work with some. There are a lot of Republicans you can work with on basic issues concerning certain funding, and they'll do okay. But when it gets to the big picture, they're not going to stand up for the Constitution. They're not going to stand up for democracy, because they're afraid of Trump and they're afraid of their base. And their base doesn't understand the Constitution, and their base doesn't understand what's at risk.
But when you turn around and you say that there are things financial that they're willing to work with you, they weren't willing to work with the president or the entire Democratic Party when it came to the COVID relief package. I mean, there are people in every single state that are desperate for that COVID relief package money, and still they refused to sign it because they said it had other issues into it and so on. Nobody seemed to have stopped Trump when he wanted to. The only person that stopped Trump from getting the money out quicker was Donald himself, because he wanted his signature, not Steve Mnuchin's, on the bottom of each and every check. You know what was going on in that crazy man's head? He thought that people would, because everybody has a scanner or something in their house, a printer, or that they have access to one, whether it's at work or at a local FedEx or something like that, that they would take a copy of it. They would either put it on their refrigerator, put it in a little frame showing that Donald Trump's signature, that he gave me money. People are just wackadoodle. But knowing that, he stopped people from getting their money several weeks because Steve Mnuchin had signed the checks. And he was absolutely 100% appalled. Almost got rid of Steve Mnuchin for that act.
I didn't realize that Mnuchin could have substituted his name for Trump's.
So originally, the COVID relief checks would be by the Treasury Secretary. I mean, that's just how it is. The same way that the Treasury Secretary has his signature on the bills. In this specific case, Trump said, no, it's my package, it's my money. You see, the man is so delusional. He actually believes that the U.S. Treasury belongs to him. I mean, that's just how delusional he is. And yet people still continue to support him. But you are right about that, Congressman. He's losing more and more people on a regular basis. And you could see that. I don't know if you saw this, but there was an article that was written, and I think it was entitled like a collective chorus of yawns. Trump's tired Arizona speech was a tremendous flop. Now, you're seeing this all over the place because he's a one-trick pony. This is a guy that goes in, quite frankly, folks, they stole the election from us. We've all heard that shit over and over and over. It was no different than even after his win in 2016. He continued with the same thing, talking about, oh, we killed it in Arizona, we killed it in Georgia, we killed it here and there, right? And that's all that he knew in order to talk about at these rallies. These people are sick and tired of hearing the same. It's almost like watching, Netflix, and there's only one movie on, and that movie, is the one that's shown over and over, and it's the only thing that you're going to hear. After a while, you start to yawn because it's fucking boring. He's boring. And that's what people are beginning to see. He's crazy and he's boring.
He is. He's the same thing over and over again. It is a broken record. And it's the man is he's an egotistical guy, and he likes the attention. He likes to be up there on the podium to speak. God knows what Melania's got to do to amuse him, but it's part of the package.
NFTs of her hat and her eyes. But it's true, he is an egomaniac. And that's one of the reasons why I always state, Congressman, that he's not going to run in 2024. He has an incredibly fragile ego. Incredibly fragile. Like, you wouldn't believe it, but it's more fragile than people even think. He would lose the ability to grift like he's doing now when he loses the second time around in 2024, if in fact that he would run. Because he can't come back and say, folks, they did it to us again. Now we have to take a bunch. It doesn't work that way. It's the boy who cried wolf now twice. So that big lie disappears when he loses again. And he knows based upon the numbers and statistics that he doesn't have a shot in hell. There's not enough Republicans in order. I actually don't even believe that if he ends up deciding to run, I don't even believe he gets the nomination. I believe that people that you have seen come out and support him and fight for him will turn around and be his worst adversaries, because they will start to expose him, and things that he did over and over again. And I bet you'll also start to see information leaking to the press about things that he did, communications, in order to really put an end to him. They're going to do to him what he did to the other 17 Republican contenders.
Well, I hope you're right, Michael. I just think I think he'll run, and I think he likes being the king, and he wants to get vengeance, and I think he loves the attention, and he'd love to be able to defeat Biden, because Biden beat him. But I hope I'm wrong. But I think the man's criminally insane, and I think he could run. I definitely think he could.
So let me ask you then, because you recently tweeted about the potential for a presidential run by Kristen Sinema, who believes that her brand of bipartisanship would appeal to a wide swath of the electorate. In response, you wrote, and I quote, "Eliminating the political divide manifested and exacerbated by Trump is very complex, not cinemaplistic. If you would, please unpack for my listeners what you meant here, as I believe it's an important point that's lost on people like Sinema, who seem to long for a political era that no longer exists."
Well, that's exactly right. It's not simplistic. I said cinemaplistic, which is what her speech was. I mean, you just can't say we need to get together and have more time working to find common ground. There isn't common ground. The Republicans aren't going to be beaten on God, gays, or guns. Guns is a big issue to Democrats, and there'll be no compromise there. There'll be no compromise on choice, and that's the God portion of this. And then the Republicans, while there's log cabin Republicans and they're gay Republicans, we've come a long way. They're not going to be leaders in those areas to try to give people additional rights to exercise decisions that make their lives better simply because of who they choose to love, et cetera. They've never been on the forefront of those issues. There are other issues where they won't come either, because race is a major common ground for the Republican Party, and they are concerned about losing the white majorities in their areas to blacks or brown, Hispanic, and they're going to play on that. So they're not going to be for immigration. They're going to play the wall. They're going to play on people's prejudices and their fears. So it's simplistic to think that you can just sit down and work with each other. Those days don't exist. The days of Everett Dirksen and Charles Percy and Nelson Rockefeller, and they're just those type of Republicans aren't in the Republican Party. And even Mitt Romney, who got respect for, he's not being as strong as he could be. And they're just he's one of the few that's still around that other era. Of course, his father George Romney was of that era, but it's not a simple thing. It's all about power, and it's about impressions, and it's about illusions, and that's what the Republicans are. They have one thing, that's beating the Democrats in 24 and getting majority in 22 and trying to get the Senate. It's power. It's power. And when they got power, they named the judges. Trump did get 3 Supreme Court judges in, which was 2 of them, I think, were really illegal. I mean, Merrick Garland should have had a hearing, and Obama's judge should have been put on the bench. The idea that you don't do it in the last year was poppycock. And then when it comes up with Justice Ginsburg dying, and they come up with Amy Coney Barrett, they did it right before the election, let alone 8-10 months out. It was done within 2 months of the change of administrations. So those seats, they shouldn't have done Amy Coney Barrett. They shouldn't have done Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. They should have had the FBI should have finished up their hearing and interviewed the women. Kavanaugh, he sexually abused that woman, and God knows who paid off his country club dues and his debts that he had. He had lots of debts, and I think it had to be gambling debts. I mean, you don't get that going to that many baseball games, which he went to at the Nationals games, and having large debts. It's not popcorn. You can't go into big debt over popcorn and beer. So
yeah, that is true.
Paid those off.
I agree with you on Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is a good man. I don't care Republican. I wouldn't care Democrat, Independent. He happens to be a good man. I've spent a lot of time with Mitt Romney, with his wife Ann. I've met most of his children. Became friendly with Spencer Zwick, his campaign manager. And I have to tell you, he's a good man. And he's taken a beating for his position, which is interesting to me, and I bring up Mitt Romney really in contrast to Kristen Sinema, because I don't understand her. And I was hoping that you can sort of unpack something for me. You know, her comment about the filibuster. I mean, she said removing the filibuster would not guarantee, and I'm going to quote now, that we prevent demagogues from being elected, and that getting rid of it would merely be treating the symptom of partisanship and not the underlying problem. Well, if you acknowledge that there's an underlying problem and that there's a symptom here, okay, you don't want to vote for the filibuster. You want to go against your party. You want to go against your president and so on. What's the answer then? Just to turn around to do nothing?
Well,
I'm not so sure that that's an answer.
Her speech was just, it was Pollyanna. And yeah, it's this, you know, because if you get rid of the filibuster, it doesn't mean you're not going to have a demagogue, but you could have a demagogue, and they got away with whatever they wanted. I just think Sinema's a contrarian by nature, and sometimes it's without a core belief. When she ran for the state legislature in Arizona early in the century, she was a Green Party person, considered a gadfly. She still is a gadfly to some extent, but she was just she was a Green Party, and she got beat several times. And then when she finally won, she didn't get much accomplished, but she got to be friendly with the Republicans and found out she could get a little bit accomplished. In the House, when she served, I think she served 6 years with me in the House. I don't remember her accomplishing anything. She likes to run, you know, marathons and triathlons and shop. And what she did with the president was really poor taste. I mean, if you want to beat for the filibuster, which is years of Jim Crow, which she shouldn't align with, and Martin Luther King III made it clear that history would not treat her kindly for that position. But you know, to go up there right before the president's going to go to your caucus and speak was disrespectful. And hopefully Biden will make sure Mark Kelly gets everything in Arizona. She doesn't get anything. I mean, what she did was really despicable, and politically it was a violation of the rules. You don't do that to your president.
What's worse is if you unpack her words. I mean, and I'm going to quote again from, when one party need only negotiate with itself, policy will inextricably be pushed from the middle towards the extreme, noting that she does not support that outcome, and she knows that Arizonians do not either. And I'm saying to myself when I was reading this, what is she even talking about here? How do you know that it will inextricably push it to the extremes, right? Middle policies. What middle policy did we see during the 4 years of the Trump administration? In all fairness, what extremes did we see under the Barack Obama administration? What, you didn't like the CARES Act? You didn't want everybody to have insurance? Okay, you know, you're entitled to your position, but to turn around to say that all policies are going to be far extremes, and that's why she's going to, you know, fight against the filibuster. When you're the president of the United States and your party controls the White House, it's supposed to be your agenda. That's why you're the president, because the majority of Americans voted for you and for your agenda. She, on the other hand, doesn't believe that the president's agenda should be first and foremost. I don't get it.
Well, the Senate already is skewed so much toward the small states. The North Dakotas, the South Dakotas, the Wyomings, the Montanas, all those small states have got an equal number of senators to New York State and California too. I think I saw some statistic that 60% of the people who live in states that have Democratic senators, that 60% of the country live with Democratic senators. So 40% who live in Republican states are controlling the Senate because it's 50-50 split. The filibuster, on top of that, gives them even more power. I don't know of a legislative body in the world, except for constitutional amendments, that requires more than a majority in either of their parliamentary houses. It's always a majority, and a majority rules. And that's the way it is. And I think we're very unique in having this filibuster, which is not in the Constitution. And half the time it's ever been used was to kill civil rights bills. It's just something that is alien to democracy, and the Senate is kind of alien to it because when they found the country, the states weren't that different in size, not like they are today, which makes it so much more minority rule. The Senate is minority rule because it's 40% of the country of those states, and that needs to change too. It's not gonna, because the Constitution is so hard to amend, but they've already got an upper hand, and they are defeating legislation. And the idea that the New York senators vote should be the same as a senator from South Dakota or North Dakota or Montana or Wyoming or Alaska. There are a lot of states with just 2 senators, and they have the same. Every state has 2 senators, but there are a lot of small states that only have 2 reps or 1 rep because they're that small in population, and they have 2 senators. Like Vermont. Vermont's got 2 senators and 1 rep. New Hampshire's got 2 reps. They're small states, but they're equal in the Senate, and that gives a minority of people who happen to generally be the more conservative brands an outsized influence on what happens in our government.
So then let me ask you this, Congressman. President Biden recently renewed his commitment to voting rights, and for the very first time discussed his support of ending the filibuster, which has thus far stymied all of the Democrats' efforts to push through legislation to this effect. What's the political reality of making this happen when you have these intransigent Democrats like the Kristen Sinemas and the Joe Manchins blocking the way forward? Is there anything that Biden can actually do?
Not really. He doesn't have a vote. He's got suasion, and whether he, but you have the difficult thing, Michael, as I'm sure you know, you can't go too far with Manchin, or he could become a Republican. And then you don't get any judges approved, you get nothing done because it's 51-49 Republican. So if you threaten him, we're not going to give West Virginia anything, or we're going to take the Appalachian Commission that we gave your wife the opportunity to be the chair of, or the co-chair, and we take that some powers from her or some monies from her. That just can alienate him where he becomes a Republican, and he wouldn't hurt him. He doesn't have a whole lot of terms to go, and he hates the Republican governor, but he doesn't have any allegiance to the Democratic Party. And the same thing for Sinema. She's had more friends on the Republican side when she was in the House than she did on the Democrat side. She spent most of her time hanging out on the Republican side and schmoozing with those Congress people. And I think it's the same thing in the Congress. And McConnell thinks she's a profile in courage. So Biden's got a tough time. I don't think he can get Manchin or Sinema. I think Sinema basically drew her red line, and I don't think she'll budge. And she does have delusions of possibly running for president or having some national, maybe what she wants is a Fox TV show or something like that. But she has some other goal rather than just running for reelection in the United States Senate, I think. And Manchin is, I think Joe he's a little older than me, I think, but so he's got at most 1 more term, I guess, and he can win as a Republican, and he could change parties. So you don't want to lose him, because then you lose your majority, your 50 votes. And if you don't have your 50 votes, you're really hurt.
Yeah, but you don't have it with him either way, right? Which
we
is
got on a lot
sad.
Of, got on judges, and that's real important. And what you got it on, you got to do and get. But if you lose him, you get it on nothing. So you can't. It's hard to. And that's where your threat is the power of the purse. And he could threaten West Virginia and Arizona with certain decisions or funding or influence on judges or whatever. So he's got to keep them in the party. So he's. You remember, a fiddler on the roof. He's a fiddler on the roof. It's a precarious situation.
Yeah. Yep. I certainly do. Well, Congressman, the hour goes by very, very quickly, and I have one last question. And of course, the question, I always bring it back to myself when I talk to you, because you were absolutely tremendous. How we first started speaking, I saw in October when you appeared before the House. You were part of the House Judiciary Committee, and you confronted Merrick Garland in terms of the fact that I had been convicted of a felony for paying off an adult film star who had sex, not with me, but with former President Trump. And I'm going to quote for a second, because you said, Michael Cohen has a felony on his record and spent time in prison for paying at the direction of, it really should have been at the direction of, for the benefit of President Trump's hush money to Stormy Daniels and another woman. Well, first, let me just say that that's actually not accurate. I never paid the other woman That's what's her name? Karen McDougal. That was paid by David Pecker of the National Enquirer.
Right. No,
Right. I believe it's pretty well known that Trump was individual one, as described in the indictment. He couldn't be indicted because the Department of Justice policy, you don't indict a sitting president. He's no longer a sitting president. So to switch gears for a moment, because again, it's about my lawsuit against Bill Barr, Donald Trump, the U.S. government, and so on, for retaliation against me and violating my constitutional rights, my First Amendment constitutional rights, remanded me back to prison in July of 2020. And that was all because I refused to waive my right to publish the book Disloyal. If the president of the United States is allowed to retaliate by imprisoning his rivals for publishing unflattering or derogatory information, would you not agree with me then that we're kind of like in deep shit as a nation? If you would, just discuss with me for a moment how you view the case against Trump and Barr.
Well, I admire you for bringing the case. You were denied your First Amendment rights, and that's why they punished you. And it was the judge that ruled against them and ruled for you, and gave you back your house arrest instead of your. I think, were you in solitary?
I was, for an additional 15. It brought me up to 51 days of solitary confinement. And when I mean solitary, I don't want people to think that you're out of that cell for even a minute. You're not. You're basically locked in there, and that's where you stay.
Yeah. Well, it was a bad situation, but I admire your suit, and I hope you're successful in your case, because they definitely did violate your rights. And it is scary to think that's something you think of in a banana republic or Eastern European Soviet satellite country, or directly in Russia. You don't think of it as America. And I couldn't believe they did it, and they did it. And it's just astonishing what Trump got away with and what he did. And Barr was complicit. I mean, it got to be so bad that he did finally quit around Christmas, because I think he saw the handwriting on the wall, what they were going to try to do with the election on January 6th. He probably gave him some good testimony. But Barr is he was a bad attorney general, and he was there to advance the agenda, I think, of the Christian right to get the 3 judges. And that's why he was there. He's part of that crowd in Washington that was their major issue. But I admire you for that. I hope they go after him as individual one. And I hope they go after him on other cases, because he's been a gangster, and we'll see what happens.
But this goes right back to where we first started our conversation about Merrick Garland and everything is so slow. For example, on July 24th of 2020, Congressman Ted Lieu and Hakeem Jeffries, they penned a letter to Michael Hurwitz, Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. And in it, they respectfully requested that Michael Hurwitz open an investigation into the potentially unlawful actions of Bill Barr and officials at the Federal Bureau of Prisons in depriving me of my freedom in order to silence me, violating my constitutional rights. And they could not have been any clearer when they said we cannot have a justice system where friends of President Donald Trump, such as Roger Stone and Michael Flynn, get special treatment, while those who speak out against him are wrongfully punished. They then go on to use the Democrats' adage that no one is above the law, not this president, not the attorney general, and not the officials at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And I call bullshit on it. That's 18 months ago. 18 months ago. And so far, no investigation has been opened. It also goes to the point that I know that Congressman Eric Swalwell had put in FOIA requests for information that's basically on point with what Ted Lieu and Hakeem Jeffries did. And after 18 months of violation of your constitutional right, of a citizen's constitutional right, by the president of the United States, by a complicit and willing attorney general. I mean, this to me is so much bigger than me. This is about, God forbid, Congressman, you're certainly not one of Trump's favorites. So if hypothetically he ends up becoming president in 2024, just like Richard Nixon had it, an enemies list. I know I'm on it. You may be on it. You're certainly not going to be number one like me, but you could be 10, 12, 15. You should not have to worry for your freedom, for your safety. Things like this cannot go you cannot ignore an investigation. And that's what they've done so far. And yet Democrats control all of it. No one could get any FOIA requests done. Nobody can get an investigation done. I mean, they made me into a political prisoner in my own country. I'm asking you, why? How is this happening?
Michael, I agree with you totally. And I've written letters, and I hate to admit the fact that when congressmen write letters to the president or administrative officials, oftentimes the president never sees them, almost all the time, and I doubt Attorney Garland sees them. I went to Garland right before he came to testify before our committee, and I told him about several letters I'd written him, and I thought my responses were just basically form letters, and that I was disturbed by him. I would like for him to see him, and he told some staffer, make sure he gets a response and blah blah blah. I don't think Garland ever saw it, and I was urging him to prosecute Trump. And that what we were seeing was as you've expressed, concern for the country and for the future of the country, and that there was no more important time to act. The time when a Judge Katzmann would have acted. And I tried to implore him on Justice Katzmann and try to get a little guilt out of him, because he respected Katzmann and hold Katzmann up to him as a figure that he should try to aspire to. But they don't see the letters, and I don't know what they do. And I'd like to get him. I can't go over to Justice and just knock on the door and say, I want to see Merrick Garland. I don't think I could see him. He comes to the committee once or twice a year, and that's it. He does his job, but they don't really, as a congressman, I get tired of getting form letters, and that's basically what we get. And I don't know if he even sees Ted Lieu or Hakeem Jeffries or my letters.
Do you mind if I ask you, how come you can't? You're a member of Congress. You're an elected official. If I was an elected official, I would go knock on his door. What are they going to do? Throw me out? They're going to arrest me as a congressman going to see the Attorney General of the United States? And if in fact he didn't take my phone call or me, I would reach out to the president and I would say, listen, I'm a big supporter of yours, Joe. I'm behind you 100% and our Democratic Party. But this is important to me. This is important to the democracy of this country. It's important to our Constitution and our future. If you're not going to turn around and speak to your Attorney General, get rid of him or make him be responsive. I expected this from Bill Barr. I expected it from Trump because I know Trump and I know exactly how he got Bill Barr to become complicit in his schemes, but not from Biden, not from Merrick Garland.
I agree with you, and I understand your outrage, and I have it myself. There are lots of times I get very despondent about the relationship that we have. And Biden, I've been a big supporter, and I've gotten very little out of it. And maybe my next term might be different. But I've tried to work with the team, and it doesn't get you anywhere. But Biden has not been, and Merrick Garland too. I respect him, but they'll put you off on an assistant, and they'll say you should see this person or that person, and the odds of getting in to see Garland are be slim and none. Slim and none. I ran into him once at La Diplomat a couple of 3 years ago. Nice fella. I saw him and I kind of thought, I know this guy. And I went, oh yeah, that's the guy who almost became Supreme Court. Nice fella. But I don't know. And I think he's got, he gives you the answer. I can't talk about cases. I can't talk about, whether we do have cases or don't have cases, investigations. It's hard to answer that. And they really do have to kind of keep that close to their vest. To be able to proceed properly and to not convict people in the press because the Attorney General says we're investigating them. So I understand that. I don't like it. And, some of that stuff just maybe happens in the movies. I wish I could be like Jimmy Stewart and go in there and tell them. It's just very disappointing. But I've tried and I continue to try. And we are having a crime subcommittee. I think it's this week. It might be next week. And one of the issues I'm going to bring up is the Bureau of Prisons, and it's going to be on the Bureau of Prisons. And this guy that was fired, I forget his name.
Michael Carvajal.
He really wasn't fired, but he left a little early.
He resigned.
Yeah. And they finally did get the credits because of the IG report that they started assigning good time credits to people for the first what was it called? The First Act.
The First Step Act.
First Step Act.
So
So they're starting to get that implemented, getting people out, and hopefully it's going to get down to people who have got punishments beyond incarceration. But that's going to happen. I'm going to ask about that man and why it didn't happen, and who's going to be the next head of the Bureau of Prisons. But that'll be at the next crime subcommittee here.
yeah. You may remember I actually filed an action against the Bureau of Prisons for the earned time credit. It went before Judge Kodal. Judge Kodal ended up ruling against me, despite the fact that I was piggybacking off of the case brought by Danya Perry. I believe it's Ortiz case that Judge Renee Marie Bum out of New Jersey turned around and said that they have an obligation to do it, and to do it now, not to wait till January 25th. That's why they're waiting. That's why they're doing so much now, because come January, it's 24th, they had to have it implemented. The way the government was seeing it, the way the Bureau of Prisons was seeing it, we have to begin the implementation. And Judge Bum turned around and said, absolutely not. It needs to be fully implemented by the 24th. I have my papers ready to go. I do know about 12 inmates that have been taken off of home confinement and put on supervised release. Now, people have to remember this is for eligible people, and you have to be of the lowest classification. I'm still waiting for mine, even though I'm off home confinement. I still sit on supervised release. So I want to be released from supervised release altogether. I meet all the criteria, and it should be done come the 25th. I'll be filing another action against them. And I want to bring it right back to Judge Kodal and let him understand that this is exactly what I told you needed to happen 11 months ago, but thank God it's finally happened. But with that, Congressman Cohen, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for all your assistance and everything, for bringing, the issue that happened to me, which I define as democracy in peril, thanks to Trump and Bill Barr, and really as a caution to the fact that the next Donald Trump, because I don't think it'll be him, the Donald Trump 2.0 could be much worse.
Thank you, Michael. It's been good to be with you. You have been a political prisoner, but I admire your voice greatly that you have extended and putting these issues out to your listeners. It's important that they get the unvarnished truth.
And I thank you so much for being with us today.